right, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. Today, we are pleased to host an event for you with State Representative Donna Oberlander, who's our new House Majority Whip. And we're hosting this with the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, but also the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce. So this is the first time we're doing a joint virtual event, and we're so pleased to do so. I also wanted to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Citizens Bank, and I'll be introducing Dan Fitzpatrick in just a moment. I just have a few housekeeping items I wanted to mention. For everyone to know, you're currently muted, and we ask that you maintain that, and that if you have any questions following or during the Q&A portion of the program, that you submit your questions via the Q&A function in Zoom. The program is being recorded and will be sent to you following this event via email. Now I'd like to turn it over to just a tremendous friend of the Chamber. We have Dan Fitzpatrick, and Dan is president of Citizens Bank Mid-Atlantic Region. He's a board member of our Chamber. And just a terrific partner in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So welcome, Dan, and thanks again.
Liz, thank you so much. And again, I'm very privileged to be both a board member of the Allegheny Conference in Pittsburgh, as well as part of the executive committee of the Chamber of Commerce of Greater Philadelphia. And again, that's why I really appreciate these opportunities to sponsor these statewide dialogues. As Citizens Bank, we're fully vested in Pennsylvania. We have over 300 branches and over 2,900 colleagues arrayed across the four corners of our Commonwealth, as well as in the critical central regions. And the bottom line here, these dialogues are of critical importance today because we're living in unprecedented times, right? The coronavirus pandemic, with 106,000 people infected in Pennsylvania, over nearly 7,200 deaths in Pennsylvania. So this is a real serious issue, obviously, from a health perspective, but obviously leading to the steepest quarterly decline in economic activity ever recorded. You put on top of that the social injustice issues that are really a critical issue facing all of us in Pennsylvania. And then you throw on top of that, obviously, some major budget challenges, right, at both the state and local level. So again, we've got a lot of issues that we're all staring down. Well, the bottom line is, while these these collective challenges really are daunting, but both the Chamber of Commerce in Pittsburgh, as well as the Chamber of Commerce in Philadelphia, are really tackling these issues as opportunities for improvement in order to better position our Commonwealth for competitive advantages in the new normal of our global economy. We talk about that global economy, but hey, going forward, we don't know how global that will be, right, with all the supply chain issues we've seen. So there are a lot of ways that we need to adapt and adjust. So the bottom line is, as a business community, what we need to do, we need to double down on our workforce development efforts and really focus on those core industries where we truly have world-class leading abilities. And I think about robotics and technology in Southwest PA, right, and cell and gene therapy in Southeast PA. And we've got so many of, and many of these capabilities and strengths really flow across our full Commonwealth. And that's what we really want to do, is focus there. And the bottom line for all of us is the objective here is, let's create more and more good, high-paying, family-sustaining jobs for great Pennsylvanians across this Commonwealth that's in a really good, inclusive, and diverse economy. That's the bottom line here, what this is all about. And that's why these dialogues are so important, where West and East talk together and talk about the Commonwealth issues holistically. So bottom line, it now is truly is my privilege to introduce our esteemed guests from the 63rd Legislative District, Representative Donna Oberlander, who is based in beautiful Clarion County. Really important role. In June of 2020, Donna made state history by becoming the first Republican woman and only the second woman in the history of the Pennsylvania General Assembly to be elected as Majority Whip, the third highest position in the House Republican caucus. As Whip, Donna is responsible for tracking House votes and informing her other Republican colleagues on upcoming issues and legislation. So a really critical role for how we move the Commonwealth forward. And it's great that Donna, Representative Oberlander, in this leadership role, It's great to have a woman in that role. We need greater diversity and a big tent on both sides of the aisle. So without further ado, let me pass it to our majority whip, Representative Donna Oberlander. And thank you so much for allowing us to play a role in this important event.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Dan. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to address both the Philadelphia and Pittsburgh chambers this morning in your first joint, I guess, state advocacy update. So it's an honor and a privilege to be able to be part of your morning. I was asked to speak briefly on issues that are, and I want to make sure you guys can actually hear me. Will somebody let me know that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, all good. All
because
good,
I'm having the same problem Dan had. I don't actually see myself, so I'm not sure that I'm on.
You look good.
Thank you. I was asked to give a bit of an update on what has happened over the past 4 months in Harrisburg, what we anticipate happening when we come back into session, of which we're still on a call of the chair, and then open for some questions and answers. So I'll just start back at the beginning of March when this thing called COVID, the coronavirus, hit and hit hard. And at that time, the very first thing that we did in Pennsylvania was change our rules to allow for remote voting. And quite frankly, that was a very big deal. It was I believe we were the first state in the nation to do that. And it was so important that we, as a government, be able to address the issues that were facing our Commonwealth in a very rapid manner and a very safe manner. And so we did that, and immediately we were able to then offer additional financial assistance to our hospitals who we knew needed the PPE, ventilators, and other things in order to address the crisis. We made sure that our schools were able to still teach our children, even though they were not able to be in the actual classroom. And some of that included concerns about the 180-day requirement, allowing the online education versus the in-person education, and a whole host of other issues around education were part of some of our first 2-week changes that were made. We also made changes to the unemployment compensation system, because for the first time in our history in a Commonwealth, and probably in our history, our recent history, put it like that, generations, we had to make some changes to allow people who were not normally eligible for unemployment to be eligible for unemployment because they were not able to work. We also passed a bill that would have mirrored the CDC requirements and would have created some predictability and some opportunity for businesses to open back up as they were in other of our competing and neighboring states. And when that bill was vetoed, we began a piecemeal approach and did things like pass the e-notary provision so that realtors, lawyers, auto sales, et cetera, could operate. I can tell you that there was a lot of concern from businesses, and I'm sure your businesses felt the same way, when the waiver program it broke supply chains and didn't allow certain things to occur. And so we spent a great deal of time working through that, and that's part of what had occurred with our piecemeal approach. We voted to allow municipalities to meet because our county governments and our municipal governments were not able to meet remotely and include the public in that process. We passed laws, we passed a hold on bureaucratic regulations during the pandemic so that things that could occur but couldn't get the paperwork accomplished were able to be finished. as part of our piecemeal approach, we also did construction, auto dealers, garden centers, mom and pop retailers, you name it. And we expected that they would operate in a safe and secure manner. But we believed that, and I'll speak for our caucus in this position, we believed that we were able to save lives and livelihoods, and that we needed to figure out the way to get to that end. And so those are the things that we worked through. And then of course we worked on the annual budget, which is the biggest thing that we do in any given year. But this year we tried to get that done sooner so that there was predictability and folks knew what to expect. Specifically our school districts, of whom we funded 100%. And then part of the budget is only a 5-month budget. So when we come back in the fall, we will be working on the other 7 months of that budget. We believe that that was a responsible way to approach it, given that there was so much uncertainty in our revenue for a couple of reasons. Businesses are not able to be in business. And we had pushed the tax deadline out to July 15th. Business taxes are in August. So we believe that that was important. And then lastly, on that particular front was the federal CARES money that had come in. We wanted to have a separate fiscal note, fiscal code and administrative code to deal with that particular issue. And the potential that we may actually receive additional money from the federal government will be part of that equation as we move forward. So those are some of the things that we've been working on. Quite honestly, we've been in session more over the past 20 weeks than normal, because we believe that we had a lot of work to do. We continue to have a lot of work to do. And we will be in session as often as we need to be in order to address those issues. So that's kind of where we have been, where we're going. And then I'll just launch right into what I anticipate when we come back in the fall. Certainly economic recovery is important to the entire General Assembly, and ways that we are able to help with that are certainly up for debate. Would love to have your feedback on that. Yesterday, we had a policy hearing with the restaurants, bars, and clubs on how 25% capacity is just not workable, and how we might be able to get them back to a safe, workable level. And so we're all learning through this process. And I would love to hear your thoughts on some things that might be helpful in terms of re-energizing our economy. I will tell you that in discussions with the Republican leadership and Republican caucus addressing the budget, there isn't an appetite for a tax increase. So, you know, that does make our choices more challenging. And I'm simply sharing the information, not advocating one way or another, but it absolutely, changes the dynamic. So that's where we are. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments.
Thank you, Representative Oberlander. I will say from both ends of the state and probably some folks in the middle, we thank you not only for your comments, insights, and for being with us today, but also your great partnership and leadership that you've brought over the past number of years, particularly on policy issues that we've worked with you on in Harrisburg. You've been great to work with. And I know also that you personally worked with and served with our president, Matt Smith. So a lot of great connections that we have with you. So thanks again. Good morning, everyone. I am Jen Beer, Vice President of Government Affairs with the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, which is an affiliate of the Allegheny Conference. And before we move into the Q&A portion of the event, I just want to remind everyone that you can submit a question via the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom. I will say that we have already had a lot of questions come in, so our apologies if we don't get to all of them, but I will do my best to try to get to an array of issues for the representative to comment on. So with that, let's start with the first one. So Representative, as we know, COVID-19 has placed a lot of challenges on families now and in the future. There has been discussions at the federal and state level via House Bill 1739 calling for paid family and medical leave. Can you share your thoughts and the thoughts of leadership about paid family and medical leave?
Yes, will you, I'm sorry, I was getting messages from your host. Will you please read the question again?
Sure, no problem at all. So it's around House Bill 1739, and it's around the challenges that families will be having now and into the future because of COVID. There have been discussions at the state via House Bill 1739, but also at the federal level around paid family and medical leave. So do you have personal thoughts on paid family and medical leave, or how is the caucus thinking about this issue?
Okay, thank you very much for repeating the question. I'm sorry about that. So paid family medical leave is not a new subject. It certainly has taken on a new flavor given the challenges of COVID. I can't speak on a caucus-wide perspective because, quite frankly, we haven't had the conversation as a caucus. That being said, I'm sure from the bill, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me here, but you can tell where the support is and where it isn't. And certainly, I believe that it has some growing support. Whether or not it can get the 102 votes in the House and the 26 in the Senate is, always the biggest question. And whether or not it would have the support of the governor, I can't say. Of course, the cost to the employer is always the biggest challenge in terms of those kinds of programs and questions. And I know that depending on what part of the state you're in, it's more accepted or less accepted. So I'm sorry that I can't give you an actual position by our particular caucus, but certainly I think there will be many, many discussions on what to expect in the fall should closures continue and the changes that have been made to the unemployment compensation from the federal government and the state government slide back into pre-COVID levels.
Yep, understood. Next question is around Senate Bill 596, which is the Pennsylvania Clean Transportation Infrastructure Act. So this would build out infrastructure for electric vehicles. It passed the Senate in November on a bipartisan vote of 42-6. Do you see that bill moving forward this fall? It was noted as it could be a good way to support business and environmental policy, especially in suburban areas.
Mm-hmm. So I have not had a conversation with the transportation chairman. However, given that he is from the Southeast, I'm sure that he has, thoughts about this particular bill. Certainly increasing our transportation and our infrastructure for transportation. I was just on a call yesterday with the transportation secretary discussing Southwest issues because I am a member of the Southwest, and it might make a great opportunity, as you said, to balance that build out of infrastructure and also environmental issues. I'm trying to recall some discussions that we've had recently over the increase of electric vehicles. And I'll be honest with you, this whole COVID thing makes it challenging to recall what was occurring before COVID. So I'm having a hard time pulling what was being said about that particular issue at that time. But certainly our committees are fully engaged and working on a host of issues for the fall. Again, also, does it help us with our recovery of our economy? And I'm not positive if there was a fiscal note attached to that, but certainly if there is, where does the money come from, and how do we prioritize where our spending is going?
Right. Okay, thank you. Next question. Healthcare providers and businesses are going above and beyond to meet the challenges to fight this virus, working longer hours, calling doctors and nurses out of retirement, using makeshift locations for health centers. And similarly, we've got manufacturers trying to retool their operations quickly to help produce PPE and other needed equipment. There is now concern about civil lawsuits arising in these areas. Is the House considering any type of liability legislation that would extend to hospitals, health systems, and businesses? I do believe that the Senate just released a piece of legislation, but I don't know if the House is considering anything.
Certainly, that's a great question, and something that I was remiss in mentioning when I was giving the COVID update is, how grateful we are for our hospitals, our healthcare associations, our nurses and our doctors. And some of the laws that we were able to push back was to allow those nurses and doctors that may have let their licensure go, but would be willing to step up, come back into the workforce. And how grateful we are to our manufacturers who are willing to change what they do. And quite frankly, many of them were very generous in donating their PPE at the beginning of this before they were required to have it. So it's been a really great partnership. I will say that civil lawsuits have been a topic of conversation. We're very concerned, people trying to do the right thing and get us through a very difficult time are then subject to a lawsuit. So I do believe that will be something that we would be interested in taking up. I certainly can't commit our caucus to it specifically, as I'm the whip, not the leader. But I would be working directly with our leadership team on, whether or not that would have the support or not. But it absolutely has been a topic of conversation, and I think it's a good idea.
That's great, thanks. That's a top issue for our chamber as well. Switching gears to a utility question. So while most customers have continued to pay their utility bills since the implementation of the utility shutoff moratorium, many still struggle to pay their utility bills. Senator Killian and Representative Quinn have proposed legislation that would use flexible funds from the CARES Act to provide additional funding for the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program and would provide assistance to small businesses who have been impacted by COVID-19. Are you aware of any progress or talks moving forward with this legislation in the near future?
So would it be out of a place for me to ask who's asking the question?
It is a utility.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking that is because I just had a conversation with a utility, and we discussed the challenge that is being created for their organizations because people are not paying their utilities. Sometimes it's legitimate that the person can't pay the utility because they're in a financial challenge. Sometimes it's because there's a moratorium on your ability to shut that utility off. And part of what we had discussed was that many of the companies do have programs available, but people aren't accessing them. They just don't pay their bill. And we will see a cliff at the end of this, not only on utility shutoffs, but also on evictions and, quite frankly, foreclosures. So I have not had a conversation with Senator Killian or Representative Quinn about their utility flexible funds. Um, but I do believe that, you know, there has to be some discussion on how we measure that. So the devil will be in the details, and I hate to put it that way, but allowing people to access funds because they're legitimately in a hard place is different than people not paying because they just don't want to pay. And how do you balance that? I think that as we come back in the fall, we held back a good portion, about a third of our CARES money, because we know that the challenge isn't over and that there will be things that we won't have anticipated because, quite frankly, this is unprecedented. So, you know, that might be an opportunity. I will tell you that a lot of people have a lot of ideas on how they can utilize that money, whether it's school issues, hospital issues, utility issues. So it's going to be quite a challenge to balance how we end up spending the $1.3 billion that's left in our current CARES allocation.
Yeah, no, understand. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry if I put you on the spot there. I just want to know who I was addressing.
No, for sure. Let's move to connectivity. The pandemic has clearly shown us how important connectivity is for schools and education, for business, and even everyday life. So issues such as 5G infrastructure and rural broadband are now more important than ever. Do you see these issues coming to the front of the legislature's agenda this fall, or what can be done to help advance them?
Well, I am in a rural district. As Dan said, I represent Clarion County. I also represent part of Armstrong and part of Forest County. And I absolutely agree that this has brought it to the forefront in every nook and cranny of our Commonwealth. I do believe that it will be pushed to the forefront. Quite frankly, I think that that's also part of our economic recovery. When you can still work while you're at home, absolutely helps to, you know, keep the machine running. But if you're in an area where you don't have that access and you're driving to, you know, 20, 30 minutes to the local McDonald's to finish your homework because you had to be sent home from Penn State, that doesn't work very well. So certainly I know that some of our counties in their allocations of COVID money are looking at building out broadband. I haven't heard it on the 5G side. That's more of, you know, the larger companies have been talking about the 5G, but in the rural areas, our commissioners and our local companies are talking about that build out, how we can interconnect across those county lines, because many of our people, you know, county boundaries don't matter. And so I absolutely believe that it will be forefront. We did just recently pass the Causer bill and the Owlette bill, which were both dealing with broadband. And I think that it's been on our radar, but this just lifted it even higher.
Yeah. Also, an issue I believe both of our chambers are supportive of. So if we can be helpful there, let us know as well.
It seems to me, just for one more moment, that the challenge in some of our areas is finding the person who is going to take ownership and say, I'm in charge, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and I need people to get on board. And I see progress being made in, as part of my job as policy chairman, we traveled the Commonwealth and saw some other places where it's working well, and they found those partnerships. And you know, now I'm seeing it being replicated. That's a good sign, and certainly we can't depend on all of the large companies to cover every inch of our Commonwealth. So it's good to see other people taking that initiative.
Yep, absolutely. So Here is a question on tax credits. With the economic climate being challenging for the state, do you foresee any tax credit programs at risk for elimination?
Tax credits are, quite frankly, always one of the first things that are looked at, whether you support them or not. Looking at that return on investment, whether or not it's making a difference. We have many people come in and let us know why they believe their tax credit's important. But I don't have any specific tax credit that I would say, oh my goodness, you should be concerned about that. It's on the chopping block. But we will be looking at the budget with sharp eyes and a very fine-tooth comb. And so certainly if there are programs that don't seem to be as successful, I certainly think that this would be the year that some things may go away.
Yep, good for probably a lot of the folks on this webinar to take heed. Representative Oberlander, you have been a champion for diabetes issues within the legislature, including being chair of the Diabetes Caucus. As you know, people with diabetes and obesity have experienced very negative outcomes when diagnosed with COVID. Is there anything particular that the state is doing to address issues of diabetes and obesity, either during the pandemic or otherwise?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for recognizing my effort for diabetes. I can't say that there has been a specific agenda or legislation that would deal specifically with those with diabetes. Certainly we know that any comorbidity and COVID is more deadly than no comorbidities and COVID. And I think that in terms of continuing our effort in healthy outcomes for those with diabetes is the best route, quite frankly. We still need to treat that as a separate. I was successful in pushing my anti-obesity bill, and I'm looking forward to having that pass. And I don't think it's the end all be all, but certainly if you're able to lose some of your body weight, then your risk for all kinds of things, diabetes, heart disease, all those things is reduced. And so that was something that I was pushing. It hasn't made its way to the governor, but I will continue to work on that. And really just making people aware that diabetes is a very big issue in Pennsylvania, and there are ways to address it, but you have to acknowledge that it actually exists, and it absolutely is across our Commonwealth, and so we'll continue to do that. But I'll be honest with you, over the past 4 months, we haven't had a diabetes caucus meeting or anything like that, simply because our focus has been basically on COVID-related, economic-related issues.
Yep, understood. Well, thank
It's
you
never far from my mind, though. It's never far from my mind.
That's great. So this is an issue that I know both ends of the state, we have a strong history of working on transportation and transit issues together. So this question is around the funding cliff that we are likely to see really around transit, but also looking at transportation overall. So there will be a funding cliff caused by the sunsetting of payments from the Turnpike to PennDOT in the coming years, and that's on both, I know, of our chamber's radars. So do you see this issue playing out at all? Probably, my guess is not with this, this budget this year, but can you talk about any conversations that you're having either at the leadership level or with the transportation chairs? We know that, now through the lens of the pandemic, the overall budget shortfalls, that this is going to be an even bigger lift than we anticipated.
Certainly, it's a great question, and it absolutely is a concern. Prior to COVID, we were, as a leadership team, having those conversations. We did have a committee that worked through that, and it wasn't a standing committee. It was a ad hoc sort of a committee. And I'm trying to recall whether we actually appointed that committee, because, as I said, I can't recall every detail from before COVID. But we did get their report. We were working through that. I certainly believe that you're correct, Jen, and that it won't be one of those things that are addressed this budget year, but we know that it's coming. The conversations are occurring. And as I had mentioned in an earlier answer, I was just on a Zoom meeting yesterday with the Secretary of Transportation. She's very much aware of it. We're looking for solutions. And quite frankly, the solutions aren't easy. And so it's going to take everyone working together to come up with that solution. So I believe that, once we get past this budget year and hopefully we have a better idea of what's happening with COVID, we can start working on those issues again.
Okay, sounds great. So I'm going to ask you a question because I know you are also a local government official, around your thoughts on municipal governance, particularly now that, a lot of our localities are also having some funding issues. Can you give your thoughts on municipal consolidation or merging of services between municipalities? Do you think those conversations might rise up now that, we're in some of these situations?
So I was a local government. I was a commissioner in Clarion County for 5 years. And I do believe that local government is the government that's closest to the people. I believe that those decisions for merging and shared services are best made by the local government and the people that they represent. So I do believe that you'll see more of that. I know that we just talked about broadband. That's an area that I see our counties working more closely on. I've also seen it with our fire services in the rural communities specifically. They are working more closely, and the funding is a real problem for them right now because they haven't been able to have their fundraisers. So I do think that you'll see more of that. However, I don't believe that it's changed, but it hasn't changed significantly enough that people don't want to just give up that turf, that power, so to speak. And so that continues to be part of the challenge. How can the state help? We can help support those decisions when they decide that they would like to do that. We can encourage it through funding for projects that overlap county boundaries, municipal boundaries. And I think that you've seen that in some of the funding that we've already done, that you're more apt to get the money if you're applying as a region versus a specific municipality.
Yep. Let's talk about childcare. There's a question that it's been difficult to get people back to work without childcare. What do you believe needs to be done to assist childcare facilities during this time?
So absolutely, if you can't have your child taken care of, you can't go back to work and feel comfortable with that. Not everybody has the option of a family member or a family daycare. And I've had a great deal of conversation with my own local childcare and what they're doing and how they're doing what they do to make it safe and secure for their children to come back in. The challenge is that many of them were not permitted to operate, and now they're trying to pick that back up. We just, I believe, released funds for childcare so that they can purchase the PPE. They can purchase the sanitization and things like that to make sure that our children are safe when they do go back, and to encourage other child care centers to open up. Now, I can only speak for my local area. I believe they're all opened back up. They certainly don't take care of, all of the children in my area, but they are, opening back up. So if there's a more specific question or a specific area that's having that challenge, I would be happy to hear that. I will tell you that the main issue that I've heard from my businesses is the disincentive that their employees had to come back to work off of unemployment because they were making more money than they may make if they came back to work. That I'm hearing less of that now, and we're at the end of July, so that's going away anyhow. But that was the biggest challenge to them, to get their employees back to work, and they needed to get back to work.
Right. I'm going to try to merge two of these questions about federal funding. So one is sort of asking about the remainder. I think there's about $1.3 billion of the Federal CARES Act that needs to yet be distributed by the legislature. And so they're wondering if the House Republican caucus, if you're able to share any insight into what you all may be thinking about distribution, but also as a pending phase 4 federal bill comes out, is there anything in particular that the legislature would like to see in that?
Great question. I will say that with the 1.1 to 1.3 billion that we have left, I had mentioned the additional opportunity to help some of our hospitals. We've had that conversation. We're certainly open to that. We are also talking about making some available to the restaurant, bars, and clubs that have been so decimated. We've also talked about education. So I can't give you a specific litany of like what we think we should be spending it on. We are, as the House Republican caucus, I can only speak for us, we are trying to be measured and not having our list completely made out, because we don't believe we know all of the repercussions that are coming from this, and we want to be able to address them as we see things change and happen. I will tell you that we've had conversations with our congressmen, our Pennsylvania delegation. We've had conversations with Senator Toomey, and we have asked for more flexibility in the use of the money if we get another amount from the federal government. Whether or not that can help to balance the state's budget or similar issues, that's what we're pushing for. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to have this be the last question. I'm going to try to merge two. One that we've gotten through the chat on workforce. I'll frame this in a second, but I'd like to also end on, I know, an issue that both of our chambers have worked on, criminal justice reform. So I know that, workforce is a big issue for folks all across the state. And one way that I know at least our chamber believes that we can help with the workforce issue is by supporting criminal justice reforms. We were very happy to see occupational licensure reform pass the legislature, and then the governor signed it just recently. So wondering your thoughts on more criminal justice reform bills, but also any other ideas that you might have in order to help with overall workforce and workforce development.
That is a great question as well. Workforce development, as you all know, is before COVID was probably the #1 issue that most of our businesses had. They had jobs available, but they didn't have the bodies to fill them. We had people who were employed but needed the skills to upgrade their ability to make more money, etc. And that's why we were very supportive of the Good Jobs for PA as a Republican caucus, but also as a assembly. We were very supportive of things that would help people get into the workforce, career and technical education, upgrading their skills. And I believe that we still need to focus on those things. That being said, criminal justice reform is absolutely a key to that. I appreciate your comments on the changes that were made. And I do believe that we will continue to work together on those issues, but I don't have all of the answers. You are our trusted partners in coming up with solutions that work for businesses, quite frankly. I can come up with an idea, but if it doesn't actually work in the real world, it doesn't mean a whole lot. So working with you on what should be done and how we can do that is absolutely key. I'm more than happy to continue to work with you. As you said at the beginning of this, Jen, I believe we have a great working relationship. We do appreciate our chambers, and I would much rather be with you in the Keystone building, sharing good food from Pennsylvania. But please keep those conversations up. I know that the Labor and Industry Committee, the Commerce Committee, the Policy Committee, and all of our members are very pleased to be able to talk to our chamber members anytime.
Hey, Jen, it's Dan Fitzpatrick. Could I add one last comment?
Absolutely.
Yes. So, Representative Oberlander, I just want to thank you for your leadership on natural gas in Pennsylvania as well. Again, we are all for all forms of sustainable energy and clean energy, and making sure that everything we do around natural gas in Pennsylvania is as environmentally friendly and safe as possible. And I know you lead on that front, but also the fact whether it's around workforce development, but these are important jobs, and it is, the electricity demand that we're talking about as we grow all the technologies. Natural gas is by far the cleanest and most abundant and cheapest form of how we can produce electricity in the Commonwealth. And we should be producing that for a lot of other of our surrounding states. And again, just want to thank you for your leadership. I know you've worked on that committee. You're close to it to a degree geographically and as an industry. I want to thank you for your very balanced leadership there. Because again, we all want a balanced approach there, but it's such an important resource. And as a country, the only way we keep our cell phones and our iPads charged is if we have natural gas flowing from the Marcellus and the Utica Shale. So thanks for your leadership there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, on behalf of both the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia, I want to give a big thank you to Representative Oberlander for joining us, as well as your continued partnership and leadership in Harrisburg. So thank you very much. Also, thank you to the sponsor of today's webinar, Citizens Bank, and Dan Fitzpatrick for joining us. We greatly appreciate your support and service to both of our organizations. And thank you to everyone who joined us this morning from both ends of the state. We hope you enjoyed this webinar and found it informative. Take care and have a great day. Thank you.